This week, drone delivers something. Tim Berners-Lee turns the web on its head. And Andy Serkis plays a tormented, augmented orc.
Please, look, take me home. I can sing, I can dance. Just take me home. I can do anything.
Knowledge is power. That's what we've been told. Whoever holds the information has the control. Our data is valuable.
It really is, as everyone says, the new oil.
And for years we've been giving it away in exchange for what? Free services, social networks, email, convenient shopping. And all the while, the big online companies have been recording our every move, selling our data on, and even using it to micro-target us based on our personalities. Earlier this year, the European Union brought in the General Data Protection Regulation to protect our privacy. But large amounts of our personal data is still stored and used by the tech giants. And some argue that it should actually be wholly owned by us, not least because the underlying infrastructure that allowed the collection of this commodity, the internet and the web, were publicly funded in the first place.
Now, the real question is, what is the contract that society should be making, in fact, with these companies, which are not only collecting citizens' data, but also really using citizens' tax money to actually fund the technology? It really is, as everyone says, the new oil. It could become critical for the ways that citizens actually access and interact with different types of services, like public services, basically interact with the welfare state in their own country.
Professor Mariana Mazzucato is an expert in global innovation and economic growth. She tries to put a value on the unvaluable. She's advocating a public body to safeguard our information.
So you could, in fact, have, say, a public data bank where the data is actually stored in something like a public repository or public data bank, which could be run by some sort of external advisory council.
As part of this early stage concept, anyone wanting to access data held in regional or national repositories would have to apply for permission and possibly pay a fee. The funds generated by these public data labs would be reinvested into areas such as the welfare state. But what about small, nimble startups that are trying to innovate? Wouldn't they be crushed under the weight of such big public regulators? The fight to regain control of our data is also being taken up by none other than the inventor of the World Wide Web himself, who's now reassessing some aspects of his invention.
We thought that all we had to do was to make it free and open, and good things would happen. And humanity would create good things, because we had great faith in humanity. And now we realize actually just making the infrastructure of the web and the internet free and open isn't enough.
His idea is to create an open operating system called Solid, which sits on top of the current World Wide Web, which users will access through normal web browsers. Here, every single piece of our data that's created will be stored in our own pods. Each pod can connect and share information with pods belonging to other users if we choose, or even with apps and organizations. So instead of the big data companies taking your data into their silos, any app sitting on the Solid platform will instead have to ask your permission to read or write to your data pod.
And that choice is very powerful because it means that you can choose. All those places will respect you, they'll give you complete control over who and what has access to it. The value of your data to you is actually greater than the value to some arbitrary corporation. So to them, you're a dot in a data field. You help confirm the sort of the spending habits of people like you, of your demographic. But to you, you're you.
The project, which he hopes will mushroom into an ecosystem of decentralized data pods, apps and companies, is, he says, galvanizing pockets of online communities frustrated by the increasingly centralized web. But interestingly, the tech companies are also making moves. Known as the Data Transfer Project, this new initiative allows data portability between platforms, currently Google, Facebook, Microsoft and Twitter.
The point is to actually be able to move the data directly from one service provider to the next. But obviously there are technical considerations at play, and it's great to see that companies are embracing that vision of, like, it's a form of complete user control.
And it might just be that these giants are determined to handle and keep our data safely.
There are banks and insurance companies that have as much, if not more, of my personal data. And I trust them way less than I trust a company that is trying to figure out and ask questions. So many times they mess up, but they learn because the pressure that we put on them actually affects them.
So if the tech companies aren't as bad as they're often made out to be, should the regulators get more creative in managing them? This is such a fast-moving area that do you think that makes it difficult to regulate and keep it contained anyway?
We need to have a certain mindset and value on a national level that we can work on from. Because if we put limits and kind of borders on privacy, that's just gonna put a stop into innovation. But if we give them values and fundamental principles to base their actions on, it's only gonna give them direction where to go.
And let's go back to the thought that data is the new oil. Now, you could argue that the oil under the ground does belong to us all, but it's the extraction and what you do next. That's the real hard work, the resources and the innovation. That's what's important.
Ingredients alone, if I have a bunch of ingredients everywhere but I can't do anything about it, I won't make any great recipe and I won't sell anything. It's the same here with the data.
But the father of the World Wide Web is hopeful that he can still realise that democratic vision of the web that he'd originally worked towards.
Having agency all across the data spectrum, have complete control over your private, personal data, it's very exciting. Exciting vision, I think, for those people who get an inkling of what it's going to be like.
Hello and welcome to the Week in Tech. It was the week that a 40-year-old Apple I computer fetched $375,000 at auction. And the tech giant bought song recognition app Shazam for $400 million. And Swiss football fans hurled tennis balls and PS4 controllers onto a pitch in protest of club investment in esports. It was also the week that Sony announced that it would allow Fortnite players on its PlayStation consoles to play against people using rival devices. The company had faced criticism for previously blocking crossplay, despite competitors like Nintendo and Xbox supporting the interaction. And at the forefront of targeted drug delivery could be this fella. This tiny caterpillar-esque bot from City University of Hong Kong is capable of carrying heavy loads, up to 100 times heavier than itself, directly to an area inside the body requiring treatment. The robot can move efficiently inside surfaces immersed in body fluids. And for slightly more digestible droid news, researchers at the University of Cambridge have developed a lettuce-peeling robot. Using image recognition to identify the lettuce and the stem, a suction nozzle then gently tears off the outer leaf without damaging the rest of the vegetable. The entire process takes a savoury 27 seconds.
If you believe the hype, every year for the last few years was the year of virtual reality. But despite that, somehow VR still hasn't gone mainstream.
All right, so last year, we talked about how our long-term goal was to help get 1 billion people into virtual reality. So let's start off by checking in on how that's going.
Facebook paid $2 billion for Oculus back in 2014. Fast forward a few years, and at Oculus's 5th developer conference in California this week, there was a welcome opportunity for embattled Zuckerberg to deliver some good news for a change.
I am excited to announce Oculus Quest.
VR this year has been all about two things: ditching the cables and expensive computers that go with them, and then making the most of that newfound freedom to move. 3 degrees of freedom devices let you look around in any direction, but you better stay sitting down, because if you move, the virtual world isn't coming with you, and that disconnect can lead to motion sickness. 6 degrees of freedom headsets change that, so now you can look around and move around. Much more convincing. There's already a clutch of standalone headsets that offers 6 degrees of freedom, so what's so special about the Quest?
We think that there are a few key qualities that any VR system that gets to scale needs to have. So first, it needs to be standalone. It's that way there are no wires. All right, second, it's got to support hands. And third, it has to offer 6 degrees of freedom.
Oculus think that full hand tracking is a secret weapon that puts the Quest above the rest. So what do those extra degrees of freedom give you? If you look around me, there's not a single tracker to be seen, and that's because these 4 cameras are doing all that heavy lifting and figuring out where I am in the room just by looking at it. This tennis requires me to move, so I need to be ready. Don't want to get an injury. Dave's got a lovely headband on. Don't know if that's going to help him. Whoa. This whole space around me has been mimicked in VR, so I can move around in this whole area. Usually virtual reality experiences are constrained to quite a small area, maybe a couple of meters, basically however big your living room is, but this can go a lot further. Oculus say that the tracking can work in huge arena-scale spaces and in any room in your home, opening up the possibility of new types of experiences. But there's not much point having a brilliant new headset if there's nothing to do in it. It looks like having good content is going to be just as important. Oculus were keen to point out that there would be stuff for you to do on the new headset by the time it goes on sale next year, with a host of games built to make the most of the tech and, crucially, convince new people to buy into VR. Oculus wrapped up its conference this year with a tantalising taste of some of the research they're working on behind the scenes. From creating more convincing interactions with our own bodies, to helping us virtually connect with other people. The one on the right there is computer generated. And by blurring the lines between the virtual and the real worlds. Impressive stuff, but it's clear that there's still a lot to learn if virtual reality really is going to change the world.
That was Steve. Now, whilst virtual reality cuts the viewer off from the real world, augmented reality is promising to enhance it by overlaying whizzy graphics. For the last few years, a company from Florida called Magic Leap has been teasing its AR goggles, which can measure the space around it and adapt its visuals to suit. The swish videos showing sci-fi style user interfaces and mind-bending interactive experiences created a lot of hype, but the problem was nobody had actually got their hands or their eyes on a set of Magic Leap's goggles to test them out. That was until recently, when the company finally released a developer's version costing nearly £1,800. But before the inevitable consumer version drops, creatives have got to make experiences which will persuade us to invest in sets of techno goggles that make us look like Dr. Octopus. Mark Chislak has been hanging out at Andy Serkis' Imaginarium studios to see what they've been cooking up in an effort to augment reality.
Acclaimed actor and director Andy Serkis is a master of performance capture.
I came for you.
So much so that back in 2011 he founded the Imaginarium Studios in London, a company dedicated to performance capture for movies, TV and games. Using 60 or so cameras, performance capture suits with tracking markers and even software created for games, human actors can be quickly turned into out-of-this-world computer-generated characters. Right here we have a brilliant explanation of what's actually going on the stage. So in the two corners there we can see our actors actors who are performing out on the stage. But in this screen just here, this is what the motion capture or performance capture cameras are actually seeing. And then over here, in real time, we can see those performances as CG characters. And they're using the Unreal Engine to help create those characters, which is a bit of video games technology. Using their performance capture know-how, the Imaginariums teamed up with Florida-based super secretive augmented reality outfit Magic Leap to show off its AR tech. And they've done this with help from an embittered orc called Grishnak, a character created in performance capture by Andy Serkis himself.
Grishnak is a character who belongs to a group of digital no-hopers called superzeros. Superzeros are basically, you have to imagine what happens to beautifully created, kind of wonderfully crafted pieces of character concept artwork that doesn't quite make the grade. So Grishnak is one of those characters whose life was going to be, he was destined to be an orc in The Lord of the Rings, and he never quite made the grade.
Okay, Andy, it's time to strap on the Magic Leap headset and check out your performance up close. Oh, here we go.
No! Over here!
Okay, so our character has erupted out of the screen and is appearing through a hole in the wall over here.
You know who we are? No, of course you don't know who we are. We're nobodies. Oh, I think I broke my ankle.
Now he's appearing in front of me here on this table. Fully three-dimensional.
I love you so much. Please, look, take me home. I can sing, I can dance. Just take me home.
The closest thing that this looks like to anything you might have already seen are the holograms in the original Star Wars films. George Sears is part of the team here. He brought the CG character to life.
Back in February, actually, we did a half-day shoot with Andy Serkis, and then later in the week, on the Thursday and Friday, me and another colleague were actually out in Florida learning how to use the device after already shooting this data. And we actually had a version of Grishnak on the table 3 days after shooting, I think it was. So we could actually start previewing how the character looked on the device.
Movies and TV are very much lean-back experiences, and virtual reality and augmented reality. Do they offer the opportunity for the audience to be part of the action, more lean forward?
Here we have a technology performance capture that, is, I think, one of the greatest 21st century tools for an actor that allows you to play anything, to become anything. And a new platform which is sort of taking storytelling into another realm, which almost brings you back to an ancient form of storytelling, which is to be in and amongst the characters that are being created, not separated by a screen. So it's much more, it feels like you're living the story with the characters.
This isn't the only outfit experimenting with this AR technology. Weta Digital and Industrial Light and Magic are also creating demos which explore the potential of this kit. For now, though, this orc with an attitude delivers a tantalising taste of the possibilities provided by augmented reality. And disappeared in a cloud of zeros and ones.
Now, one of those data companies that knows me better than most, better probably than me, is Google. And can you believe that this week it turned 20? Although it looks pretty much the same as it did way back then, under the bonnet and behind the scenes, boy, has Google grown. It all started when these two guys, then studying at Stanford University, began to work on a small project to create a searchable list of the world's web pages. It wasn't the first one on the scene, but what set it apart from its rivals was its clean design and its genius ranking system. But the Google search engine is now just one business underneath its parent company, Alphabet, which also makes the Android operating system and the home voice assistant. And then there's the mysterious Moonshot factory, the research lab that works on the more out there projects like the Waymo self-driving car. Now, not many people have seen inside Moonshot, but Alison Van Diglen got a rare opportunity to explore.
This innovation lab has lofty ambitions to solve big world problems with tech breakthroughs. Here, people get excited about crazy ideas like delivering burritos from the sky. They even get bonuses for scrapping projects. So why is this fetish for failure part of their recipe for innovation? I am here to watch the lab's next idea lift off the ground. Like its biggest rival, Amazon, Google is hoping drones can take speedy deliveries to new heights. But unlike its competitor's drone, this one doesn't have to land to drop its load. Instead, it uses a winch system to unhook the package. It can fly for about 12 miles, carrying loads of up to 1.5 kilograms.
And the hover system allows us to hover with great reliability and safety. You see how there's 12 of these. We can have multiple fail, and we can still fly okay.
Wing has been delivering dog treats and gathering tons of data in Australia for years. But in the US, the competition is hotting up. Thanks to an FAA program supported by the Trump administration, about a dozen US regions will soon see drones buzzing in their skies. Welcome to the Design Kitchen. This is the heart of the Moonshot factory. This is where prototypes are designed, built, and sometimes even destroyed. Taking me round is the man at the helm. He says people often think because of Google's deep pockets, they can just throw money at crazy ideas.
People ask regularly, oh, you have to have near infinite money to fail fast. It's exactly the opposite. You could figure out now that the project you're running has an Achilles heel that's going to doom it. Or you could figure it out 3 years and tens of millions of dollars from now. You need near infinite money to not fail fast. What we're suggesting, what we're practicing here, is being the card counters of innovation, not the gamblers of innovation.
So this is a vial of foghorn sea fuel, which is one of my favorite projects that we did at X. The idea was to make renewable fuel by extracting CO2 from seawater.
This project was trying to solve a much bigger problem than the world's deliveries, climate change, but had to be shelved a couple of years ago. Even though the method was viable, the cost was not. But Teller's proud of X's inventions, even its costly failures.
We ran an experiment. Yeah. It turns out that's not the right way to do it. Yeah. That happens 99% of the time, that the experiments we run turn out to have the answer, nope, nothing under that rock.
But a fraction of the time, they get lucky. Project Loon is one of the X-Lab projects that recently flew the coop. It hopes to bring internet connectivity to some of the remote communities in the world. Kenya is first on the list. But relying on floating balloons to provide internet has its critics. It can go offline when the atmospheric or financial climate changes. Some naysayers even wonder if this lab's geniuses are living in a bubble. Is Teller's team even aware of the world beyond Silicon Valley?
Our job should be to try to think through as thoughtfully, as ethically as we can, what unintended consequences might be, and head those off at the pass in how we design the technologies.
Despite spin-offs, the lab hasn't yet made a profit. It may be a cliche to say tech can make the world a better place, but these guys really believe it.
That was Alison Van Diglen at Moonshot. And that's it for this week. Don't forget, we live on Facebook and on Twitter at BBC Click. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.